Good morning. This video will address another video put up by Labarum 312 that addressed my video dealing with Tyndale and his use of Easter versus Passover. Now, initially, the reason I made a response video dealing with Labarum on that point was because he denied, when I raised the question, well, why didn't Tyndale use the word Passover in the New Testament? Labarum had said the word didn't exist, and therefore that's why he didn't use it. But in fact, by his 1534 edition, the word Passover did exist, and therefore he was using Easter as a term for Passover, a New Testament term for Passover, that the word Passover, which he coined, did not exist. Did exist by 1534, and that was the reason why, again, I responded to that, because frankly, you have to explain why he was using the word Easter as opposed to Passover, and when the word Passover existed. Now, again, what Labarum 312 is saying, that this is not an error in the King James Bible. This is an anachronism, that Passover and Easter were used as synonymous terms. And in the case of Tyndale, that is true. The fact is that there was a usage of Easter representing the Old Testament Passover, but it had a New Testament connotation. And that's where the differences come about, and why there's has to be looked at more closely. He can't explain, when we watch the video, he can't explain why Tyndale chose to use Easter instead of Passover. And then he tells us, well, maybe Tyndale was in a rush, and he was, that type of thing. Now, Tyndale knew exactly what he was using. He had the word Passover for Pascha, and he chose to use Easter. And that was the whole point, that gradually, as the word Pascha was translated in Passover by the later English translations, it was kept one time in Acts 12:4, and that's what has to be explained. And the reason, and this is what Labarum doesn't want to explain, so we're going kind of circles here. And point, I'm not saying that it's a pagan holiday. We're both in agreement that Easter represented the Christian holiday of celebrating the resurrection. And that is what the King James translators would have seen, why they rejected the Geneva Bible's use of Passover, why they put Easter instead of Passover, because they saw Passover, the day of Passover had passed. And again, he just wants to ignore the fact that he goes to Luke 22:1, look at 22:7, you'll see the day of Easter, the day of unleavened bread, as the Easter lamb, the sacrifice representing the actual Passover day. And that day had passed. We now days of unleavened bread, and therefore the actual Passover day had passed. And anytime the phrase the Passover is used, it is referring to after the Passover is used, it's referring to the actual Passover day. And therefore, we're going back to Numbers 33:3 and Joshua 5:10-11. And he just wants to kind of say, well, that usage has changed. That doesn't change the fact that once that phrase, after the Passover day is over, the Passover is over and is now in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and that's how it was always considered. So again, this is again, and also I'm not referring once again to any pagan holiday. So the point was, that video was to point out that an error that Labarum made, that Tyndale did have the word Passover that he could have used. He chose not to use in the New Testament. There's a New Testament connotation, even though using synonymous in a synonymous sense. There's a way that Passover wanted to be seen as Old Testament, and Easter wanted to be seen as New Testament, and it's kept one time in Acts 12:4, and it is not an anachronism. In fact, if Easter is an acceptable translation for the word, because Passover can't be used for that word. It is not the Passover, because the Passover had passed on the 14th. It is Easter, and the day that would have been the day that the Christians would have celebrated, the day of resurrection, which is the first fruits, which followed after the Sabbath in that period. So there's a specific day that they're looking at, Sunday, not the Jewish end of the Jewish feast, which would have been on the Saturday. So again, there's distinctions that the King James translators would have looked at, and they're very careful with. There's not a word that can just they just in kind of a willy-nilly just kind of, well, let's just pick Easter instead of Passover and run with that day. So again, the point of the Tyndale video was simply to point out that Labarum had made a comment that was incorrect. The Tyndale certainly had the word Passover that he coined. He could have used. He chose not to use the New Testament. Gradually, the word Pascha did come to mean Passover in all references to the Jewish Passover, except for one time in Acts 12:4, when the King James translators rejected the word Passover that the Geneva Bible had used. They had taken out the word Easter in all the cases of 1560, and in fact chose to use the word Easter. That's what has to be explained. The fact is that Easter is the correct word to use, and the King James Bible is correct in using it. It represents not the Old Testament Passover, the Jewish Passover, but the Christian feast of Easter. Amen. Thank you.